This has been a difficult video to put together, not just because I love the original trilogy, but because trying to make sense of all that pent-up fandom and conversely how I felt about Andromeda, well, it took some time. The general dialogue surrounding this game didn't exactly help either. I had noticed that in all the stuff floating around about Andromeda's bugs and visuals, many of the core issues and strengths had largely been ignored. So that's what I'll be doing here, breaking down what I consider to be the core strengths and weaknesses of the game before tying my feelings up neatly into a little ribbon at the end. Timestamps and all relevant links will be in the description, as always. I will open this by saying Andromeda is like Mass Effect, meaning the first game in the original trilogy, scarily so in point of fact. And now that I think on it, mechanically it functions very similarly to Dragon Age Inquisition as well, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. For example, the inventory system, the UI, is messy and overcomplicated, just like Mass Effect 1. In both games, I wound up consciously ignoring the inventory, something I hadn't done before or since these games. And I did so as frequently as I could get away with it, only in this game, it's far worse. Items and the like are hard to find, hard to sort, hard to sell for those reasons, and never ending. And to top it all, you pick up a lot of items as you play the game. Ammo, weapons, consumables, armor, you name it. Which was made even trickier by a meager inventory system. That issue was fixed in one of the earlier patches by expanding the inventory, but still doesn't tidy up the abundance of stuff assaulting your senses as you try to make heads or tails of it all. But that's just a few of the issues. Concerning items, I haven't talked at all about missions, which appear to self-prioritize without you knowing, even if you have a specific mission or task marked. The resulting journal confusion, Strike and Apex missions, cryopod points, research and development, and email. Put simply, because of the complex web of menu systems, you can miss everything from tasks to key research items to loot caches if you aren't looking closely enough, which just isn't good design. Though I really have no clue how the team could have sorted all that information into a sensible, intuitive format, which is why I don't design user interfaces. Also, as in Mass Effect 1, you spend most of your time quote-unquote exploring alien ruins. I say quote because Breath of the Wild has truly redefined the sense of exploration and discovery this generation. By contrast, Andromeda's exploration is more like rattling around a large open space until you stumble upon something fairly small. You interact with old glyphs and remnant towers that could easily be subbed with the Prothean technology of the original trilogy that you discover as you explore alien planets in your Mako, a buggy for planet traversal, which has been swapped out for the Nomad in Andromeda, and I'll get to that in a bit. Anyway, to activate these remnant tech towers, you have to solve Sudoku-style puzzles after scanning for the glyphs needed to fill the blanks. Now, this is a personal problem, I'll make no qualms about it, but it bears mentioning for fellow, not good puzzle solvers. As someone who is personally abysmal at Sudoku, these puzzles were a headache for me. However, you could avoid these Sudoku puzzles altogether with remnant keys, which I did wherever humanly possible. But back to the tower glyph things. Like Inquisition's shards and shard caves, remnant interfaces unlock the path to a vault, a shiny labyrinth of beautiful alien technology deep underground that can terraform a planet, something I was very excited to explore on Eos. Subsequent vaults seem to half in size with each new planet explored, though. So, whatever lofty promises the first vault makes were all but discarded by the time you reached Voeld or Haval's more modest caverns. Though they can and do increase in number, still, I was mildly disappointed after the thrill and excitement of Eos's vault. It doesn't all resemble Mass Effect 1. Scanning planets, for example, was not the most enjoyable feature from Mass Effect 2, yet returns here, and it hasn't improved or changed at all since then. When you activate your scanner, chances are you'll find 1 or 2 items per galaxy, usually mineral deposits or wreckages, that rarely add side missions or levels. The only other function it serves is to reveal a planet summary, which could have been much more interesting if these descriptions were, well, more interesting. Reveal more mineral deposits, more wreckages, experience points, or landing zones. Repeat until insane. Perhaps it's unfair of me to compare Andromeda to the original trilogy, similarities be damned. It is, after all, its own thing, and to that I say, good point. On to a new system then. I'll start with Sam. A great idea in theory and a new addition to play. Sam is an AI system that helps you along your journey and should make exploration more interesting, only he's sadly relegated to the odd passing comment about atmosphere and radiation or the scanning of objects, another missed opportunity that gains you research points but no real texture to the play experience or story. Ultimately, Sam renders exploration kind of dull. Disappointing, as exploration needed something extra. I would have loved to have been able to unlock unique conversations with him, not just on the Tempest or at Sam Node, but whilst on missions. Banter, perhaps, Sam practicing his bad jokes if party chatter goes quiet, for example. He could have provided tidbits of interesting or even useless but funny information or trivia, having scanned an object, to add to the amazing lore of the series, or further expand squadmate interaction. You must be thinking I hate this game after all that. Choosing to start with the cons probably didn't help. Best to get them out of the way though, rip it off like a plaster. Now I can get into the pros of the thing, and there are plenty. Outposts, for example, are the best feature by far, and when I say this, I mean narratively and mechanically. Searching for a place to settle, clearing remnant temples to safeguard new worlds, terraforming, setting up outposts and meeting the team that run them, it makes you feel like a part of the initiative. Unlike the lofty goals and adventures of Shepard, Ryder is on the ground level, helping people out of cryo and into those golden worlds they dreamed about. It's a simple, effective idea that works to make play interesting by adding choice. Would you like to build a research center or a military base? Say something for the record that will immortalize your message for the history books. It all bolsters the narrative impact as you build a legacy. Everyone knew of Shepard. He or she gave interviews and spoke to important people, but all of the hubbub took place off-screen, someplace else, because the crew of the Normandy didn't have the time to appreciate the buzz surrounding their achievements. By contrast, the crew of the Tempest are not just part of the culture, they mould it with their hands day by day. What I'm trying to say is, Shepard was a soldier, a hero. Ryder is a space mayor hero, and building outposts strengthens this aspect of the narrative quite beautifully.
What you achieve with that remnant vault is unprecedented, Pathfinder. Impossible. But with new scientific talent waking up, we'll unravel those mysteries. The whole Nexus will benefit.
We've taken some hard knocks, but this proves we'll always get up again.
Always.
Well, what are you waiting for? There's a new world out there.
Thank you, Ryder.
And you remember that confusing UI I was talking about? Well, it may be cluttered and completely overwhelming, but it hides a highly detailed, refreshingly fluid upgrading and crafting system for your Ryder. I've seen a lot of people comment on how smooth the combat is, and they aren't wrong. Combat has been improving with every Mass Effect game released. But I haven't seen a lot of love for the implementation of the RPG elements in Andromeda, which is a real shame. But great news for those of you who were saddened by the series' jump from an RPG to a third-person action game and wanted a little more than just a good shooter from Andromeda. You can choose from a variety of combat, biotic, and tech skills without class restrictions. You can change and level up Pathfinder profiles if and when the occasion calls for it, so Sentinel, Vanguard, Infiltrator, Explorer, all for added bonuses. You simply aren't boxed into any one corner, which means that you have a higher probability of utilizing different skills, weapons, and teams rather than having to rely on the same combinations, unless of course you prefer them, and I can't argue with that. Considering the sheer amount of choice you have for Ryder, restricted choices offer a welcome balance for your squad mates. Upgrading offers a handful of skills that you can tamper with or prioritize, but don't overwhelm. And it's worth noting with the latest patch you can undo and reassign all of your skill points, not just for Ryder but your teammates as well. It does cost credits, which will increase every time to reassign, however the option is open to you. Back to crafting. It's not too dissimilar to what we've seen in Dragon Age Inquisition. Craft your armor and weapons, and chances are you'll make quick work of anything. The research points gained from scanning objects can buy you blueprints that you build in the development half of the station. A gross oversimplification, but I have a feeling this video will be too long as it is. You can buy the stuff you need, find the stuff you need to build and mod the stuff you need, and you can get the core ingredients back by simply disassembling before moving on to the next. And this doesn't just apply to the crafting and customizing of armor and weapons, but another important vehicle in your arsenal, the Nomad. See, I told you I'd get there eventually. Though another throwback to Mass Effect 1, which isn't entirely a bad thing, it's also fantastic to ride around in and frankly puts the old Mako to shame. Shifting to 6-wheel drive is perhaps the best addition, and helps vastly improve your journey across a variety of different terrains. Boosting your speed maintains a nice healthy balance, so you don't wind up flying all over the place, and the same can be said for the quick jump feature. But as I said, you can develop new tech to improve your vehicle and tailor it in the way you want. Increase the speed, how high you jump. It's just as tailorable as your rider, items, and squad mates, which is a welcome improvement if you ask me. The buggy also creates a number of opportunities for your squad to chat in the back while you drive. By no means a new feature, conversations trigger very frequently and makes the car ride a lot less dull. I found out some really interesting things about my crew during those long drives, and the way they interact with one another was really insightful. PB's father was an Elcor, something Drac can't believe and assumed she had a Krogan for a father based on her feisty personality. Jarl takes his time to get to grips with the way his new alien companions view the world and why. I could go on, and I would actually argue that some of the best character development happens in these moments. And now that we're on the subject of story, I should probably talk a little bit about that, shouldn't I? We all know that Mass Effect games consistently attempt what no other games really did for a long while. Yes, Mass Effect is an RPG, third-person action shooter, but it allows you to interact with and affect the world and its characters on a whole new level. This is where the series shines, and for the most part, Andromeda does hold up. This is mainly down to the crew, that are varied and interesting, some even brand new species. The same can be said for romances and such, which can offer surprising range, though not always. More importantly, each crewmate, except maybe Gil, can be quickly summarized and identified. PB is the restless Asari, who'll risk anything to get out there and do something. Vetra is the sly one, with a heart of gold. Drac is the aging veteran. Lexi is a doctor who might need to work on her bedside manner. You're well within your rights to dislike any of these folks, but they're well defined. I couldn't say the same for, say, the crew of the Endurance, or the other 2 survivors in Dead Space whose names have completely escaped me. The team grow on you over time, if you let them, and remain fairly consistent throughout. Sadly, for every 7 good responses Ryder has prepared, there'll be at least one that sounds strangely juvenile for a grown man or woman. In that respect, the writing can be a little off-key, tonally, so I have a tendency to agree with the general consensus on that, where Ryder is concerned. It's a difficult line to toe, considering that Ryder is supposed to be a mouthpiece for the player, but not so vanilla that we can't dive in and have fun. Still, there's something about these uncomfortable shifts that drive a big old wedge between you and your attempt at roleplay. Occasionally there would be real limitations on what you could say to someone too. In the conversation with Suvi, for example, she tells you she believes in God, and your only 2 response options are something along the lines of, I agree, or I don't believe in God. There's no, science and faith, that's interesting, ... or I'd like to know more. Only, I agree or disagree. Hello, no one asked you, Ryder. Speaking of which, Paragon and Renegade have been stripped from the game. This time they're less clear, more middle of the road, and yet still, as I just mentioned, have a tendency to boil down to 2 main options. I'm okay with the removal of navigable altruism, but without it, interactions would benefit from a wider array of options more frequently, especially considering how the voice actors have quite good range and personality. But I understand that this would take much more work, and I still favour the reams and reams of choices in Dragon Age Origins, so who am I to judge? Having said that, I will say that if dialogue choices aren't going to be listed on screen like the good old days, then tone is a good way to go in terms of simplicity. I want to add here, and yes, I realise my pros and cons list has lost all sense of identity now and I'm just making observations willy-nilly at this point, that finding the time to talk to the crew was a little disorientating, for me at least. There are very few clearly established time slots to walk around and talk with your crew, which I'd grown used to. This could really be considered a plus. Andromeda allows you to walk around and talk whenever you want, no restrictions. I imagine a style such as this will sit well with some, but apparently I need a bit more structure, because I had a hard time keeping up. I found myself missing entire conversations and subsequent missions. When I did speak to my crew, I'd receive email confirmation of our chat immediately after when I checked my terminal, which was a little odd, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to happen. I walked in on arguments and big character moments just after the first or second Trail of Hope mission, which is your first big one, shall we say, at a time when I felt I hadn't had the chance to get to know anybody above, "So, where are you from?" This imbalance is likely because of my playstyle, but where games of BioWare past had strict structure for action and rest or relaxation, Andromeda is larger and with fewer boundaries, which makes time management, especially concerning social interaction, a thing to keep an eye on, a close eye on. Generally speaking, I can't say the story starts slowly. It begins almost exactly like Mass Effect 1. Introductory ship level. Foe introduced. An alien planet combat heavy level. Crewmates you don't know or care about die. Tragedy strikes, and the power shifts to you, blah 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 blah. Only Andromeda feels much faster, because of a distinct lack of the perfunctory Citadel level that went on forever and a day, replaced instead by a condensed Nexus area, which is literally a structure based on the Citadel. Deja vu, it's a thing. There are some great new elements to the story though. I liked how the late Jen Garson was the shepherd of the initiative, the icon, the one people look to for guidance and inspiration. You walk in Jen's shadow almost every step of the way. She lives on in vids and holograms almost everywhere you look, a spectre of hope hanging over the initiative. The family factor was really interesting, and a nice change of pace for the series. I don't want to spill too much as I want to keep this video relatively spoiler-free. I will say that there is action, intrigue, good versus evil, a big cast of very different characters, male and female, human and alien. It's all good. Nothing earth-shattering, but good, too enjoyable, and even entertaining on occasion. Liam's loyalty mission, for example, is comedy gold, and a highlight for me personally.
We don't know where anyone is or how anything works. And now we're fighting some asshole who wants everyone chained. It's like hitting Andromeda all over again. Shield the bay.
Don't make this about the whole initiative. We're here to help, and why am I the one defending your plan?
I don't know.
I'm not seeing anyone really covering the soundtrack, so I'm going to. And I want to note that I'm speaking, again, generally here. I'm not about to review every track. It very much resembles the sparse, bouncy, synthetic tunescape that we associate with the series. Only in Andromeda, it takes those melodies and sounds of old and freshens them up, like cleansing the palate. It flushes out all the old residue with something simpler, cooler, and cleaner. It's the Mass Effect score if it had just eaten a polo. When I think back to certain tracks, however, I draw a bit of a blank. I do recognise which game the music is from as soon as I hear it though. The way I see, or hear it, is that the tone, sonic styles, and choice of instrumentation are more memorable than the melodies themselves, which is risky. I imagine a game in a presumed new trilogy would need to establish itself in some way, carve out an identity, and musically, the score does this, but in a textural way. Though this can be a real strength. Look at the Unbreakable score by James Newton Howard as a beautiful example of stylistic motifs. This backseat sort of approach can also be harder to identify or pick out in your mind if it lacks any memorable melodies, which Andromeda's score mostly does. I mean. I'm on the fence with this one, honestly. Now at this point, you're probably wondering why I haven't talked about the visuals or the character creation. And yes, this is a deliberate decision. There are two reasons for this. 1. I wanted my video to focus on the things I feel people haven't really been talking about, but should. And 2, I think the issue of bugs, facial animation and presets feeds into a much broader discussion with roots in other ground, so to speak, and so deserves its own feature if I'm to talk about it at all. And frankly speaking, these discussions have been had by numerous individuals already, in some cases before the game had even been released to the public. There are entire videos, articles and even channels dedicated to these issues, and this video covers my thoughts on everything else. Now that the clinical part is done, I want to end this criminally lengthy video with my personal feelings about the experience, how I felt in spite of the aforementioned issues and strengths. Despite all of the pros and cons that may or may not be enjoyable for others, I personally had a hard time drumming up the want to dip back into Mass Effect Andromeda. You know that feeling, the it factor, the draw, which renders it almost impossible to put down a book or makes you think, just one more episode, just one more minute. I just want to finish this section and then I'll go to bed, I'll eat, I'll clean up. Andromeda didn't do that for me, especially in the way that other BioWare games have. It lacked a spark, likely because of the troubled development beautifully covered in detail in this article, which I will link in the description, and I urge you to go and read if you're at all interested in the whys and wherefores of this situation. I desperately wanted to finish this game for a video, but 60 plus hours later, and all interest I'd generated had been spent. I felt that was enough of a reason to go ahead and sum up my thoughts regardless of whether or not I reached the final mission. I'll leave that up to you to decide whether or not that's sufficient. Needless to say, there is some good, some bad, and though I'm disappointed by my experience overall, I'm not angry at BioWare or anyone else for that matter, just ready to move on to something else. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comment section below or on my Facebook or Twitter pages. I've been speaking to a lot of you over the course of my time with Mass Effect Andromeda, and it'll be nice to finally get into a bit more detail. I look forward to seeing you all in my next video, which will most probably be about this year's E3, my thoughts, and what I'm most looking forward to. Thanks again.